2012 sees the anniversary of the tragic sinking of one of the most famous ships in the world. Night of the 14th and 15th of April, the Titanic, a massive new liner, sank with the loss of over 1,500 people. The ship was one of several modern liners that sailed from Europe to America, and in 1912 this was the only way to travel between the continents, for the very rich on business and pleasure, and for the very poor who were emigrating. 1,503 people died on that night, and 705 survived, mainly saved by the liner Carpathia, whose captain was the heroic and well-organised Arthur Ostrom. The film and photos that follow tell something of the story of the Titanic through the memorials that can be found in Southampton. If you're lucky enough to live in the city or close to Southampton, you might want to enjoy the 1¼ mile walk yourself. If not, sit back and enjoy this presentation. The Titanic Postal Workers Memorial commemorates 2 sea post officers and their 3 American colleagues who died. 1912 was a time when 2 new methods of communication were really changing people's lives. The letter post between America and Europe was much faster because of the new liners like the Olympia and ships similar to the Titanic. The other revolution in communications was the wireless telegraph, used on all the transatlantic liners. It was a wireless message that alerted the Carpathia and brought her to the scene of the sinking of the Titanic, thus saving 705 lives. The Titanic Postal Workers Memorial can be found near the council chamber in the Civic Centre. It's made from a spare propeller that was donated by Harland and Wolff, the company that built the Titanic in Belfast. Also to be found in the Civic Centre is the Titanic Book of Remembrance. This commemorates the Southampton victims of the Titanic. The Musicians' Memorial is a reminder of one of the best remembered incidents during the sinking of the Titanic. The ship's orchestra, led by Wallace Hartley, continued to play as the ship sank. An orchestra of all men, they stayed, leaving the lifeboat places for the women and the children. Interesting and tragically, the pay for Jock Hume, the 21-year-old violinist, was stopped by the White Star Line at 2:20 p.m. on the 15th of April, precisely when the ship sank. His relatives were also charged for part of his uniform and the return of his body. The Titanic was a great engineering feat, with watertight compartments up to the first deck above the waterline. The engineers believed this made the ship unsinkable, but what it couldn't cope with was a gash along the side of the ship, and this is what happened to the Titanic. A sound design, produced by Harland and Wolff in Northern Ireland, the 1914 memorial to the engineers was built of granite and bronze, and has a great 7-foot angel in its centre. It also includes the names of many of the engineers who died on the ship, including the guarantee group from the builders Harland and Wolff, who travelled on the maiden voyage to guarantee the soundness of the ship's design. The Titanic Crew Memorial was originally on Southampton Common, and it commemorates the lives that were lost of the stewards, the sailors and the crew. It was unveiled in 1915 and can now be seen in Holyrood Church in Southampton Town Centre. The former Sailors' Home is in Oxford Street. It was opened in 1909, in a decade when many of the transatlantic shipping lines were moving to Southampton. It provided sailors with temporary accommodation whilst they were on land. A number of the crew of the Titanic stayed here before their fateful voyage. The Grapes of Wrath public house was built in the 1850s, close to the railway station. 3 of the Titanic's crew, the Slade brothers, enjoyed a long night in this pub the night before they were due to sail. When they turned up late the following morning to the ship, they were not allowed to go on board, and so missed the voyage. The pub can be found in Oxford Street. In the early 1800s, Southampton was a spa town, a fashionable resort, and in 1839-1840 the London and Southampton Railway Company arrived in the town, and a new station was built. In the Edwardian period, this station became increasingly important as the transatlantic shipping lines moved to Southampton. The station became very busy. and it was here that many of the passengers arrived before embarking on the Titanic. Southwestern House was built next to the railway station and is one of the new Edwardian hotels in Southampton. It was here that many of the first-class passengers stayed before the voyage on the Titanic. The splendidly ornate building is now divided into flats and can be found on the corner of Canute Road and Terminus Terrace. Canute Chambers, the headquarters of the White Star Line, can be found in Canute Road. Several companies had moved to Southampton from Liverpool in the first decade of the 20th century. The White Star Line built 3 sister ships for the transatlantic route. The first, the Olympic, was launched in 1911. The second was the Titanic, and the third, the Britannia, which never entered commercial service but was commandeered for the war effort in 1914 and sank when it hit a mine in 1916. The Titanic left the White Star Dock on the 10th of April 1912. Now known as the Ocean Dock, this memorial is to the passengers. The passenger lists included 712 third-class passengers, many of whom were seeking a new life in the United States. Of the 712, only 181 survived the disaster. Also on board were 337 first-class passengers, including some of the richest people in the world, John Astor and Benjamin Guggenheim. Isidor and Ida Strauss were an older couple who were also travelling first class. They are remembered because they decided to stay together rather than be separated when the ship was finally abandoned. The passenger memorial can be found at the entrance to Dock Gate 4. In St Joseph's Church in Bugle Street, there's a memorial to Luigi Gatti, who managed the restaurants aboard the Titanic. The last memorial in Southampton that must be mentioned, but is not part of the Titanic Trail, is to Captain Arthur Rostrum. Captain Rostrum was the captain of the Carpathia, the Cunard liner that saved 705 of the passengers from the Titanic. The wireless operator on the Carpathia, Harold Coltham, had left his headset on whilst getting undressed for bed. It was then that he heard messages for help from the Titanic. Captain Rostrum was immediately informed, and he issued 23 separate orders preparing his ship to take on board survivors. He pushed the Carpathia to 2.5 knots above her normal fastest speed to get to the scene quickly. His efficient organisation and his coolness in a crisis saved hundreds of lives. If you're interested in the story of the Titanic, go to the Southampton City website. Also in April 2012, the Sea City Southampton will open its doors in the old Magistrates Court building to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Titanic disaster. The exhibition will include 2 galleries. The first covers Southampton as a gateway to the world, recounting the stories of people who have departed or arrived in the port of Southampton over the last 2,000 years. The second exhibition is the story of the Titanic and will focus on the hidden history of RMS Titanic's crew and will explore what it was like to be in the Merchant Navy 100 years ago.